have been creating comics and manga for fun for a number of years, and I'd say I've accumulated quite a selection of art supplies that I've used for most of my projects, so I will be sharing that all with you guys today. We do have a lot of ground and art supplies to cover, so we'll skip the formalities and just get right into it. This first section of art supplies here will be tools I use for the sketching phase. That includes ideation, thumbnailing, all the way to the final sketches. My thumbnails are generally extremely messy because I'm focusing on putting my ideas on paper before all of the refining and editing. This is usually done on my general sketchbook. Personally, the cheaper and least expensive the sketchbook is, the better, so that I feel less bad filling up a page with random scribbles. And the pen is anything I can get my hands on. It could be a brush pen, a ballpoint pen, and even a normal office pen. Once I get a cleaned up thumbnail for the entire comic and I decide it's time to move forward, this is when I start transferring the drawing from the sketchbook and start drawing it out on a digital software. Because I like to transfer my files across many different devices, I usually do the digital sketches on the Procreate app, which is available on the iPad. That way I'm able to have my project all in one place, but also I do personally find it easier to transfer files from an iPad than from a PC. Just my personal preference. After the digital sketches are cleaned up enough, I then proceed to print my pages on a normal copy paper. If I'm not using a digital sketch and draw directly on the paper, I do use this Pilot Color mechanical pencil in bright blue. The blue light is actually copier and scanner friendly, so if you forget to erase in an area, the scanner generally won't be able to pick up the blue line. And of course, I do use an eraser to remove any sketch line. Any eraser works, but my preference is this mono eraser. With that said, it's time to move on to the next phase of art supplies, which is at the inking stage. For the sake of making it easier to follow, I split the inking section of the video into two parts. So for this part, we will be going over the paper and tools that are generally used once we start working on the final paper. My preferred brand is the Leader Manga Manuscript paper in the A4 size. Some people like to use the version with the guidelines. I have used this version in the past, which is very useful, especially when drawing in panel borders. The blue marking on the paper indeed do not show up on the scanner, so that's never going to be the issue. Both the marked and the plain versions are very equal in terms of quality. Both handle ink lines very well, and the paper is thick enough so that it won't crinkle or fold under a lot of pen ink. If I'm working on a double spread, I like to tape the papers in the back by using washi tape. Any brand of washi tape works, but the specific one here is the MT brand, which is found in a lot of Japanese stationery stores. For straight lines like panel borders, I use this clear 18-inch ruler. It's easier for me to see if the lines are going straight when I can just line up the edges of the paper with the ruler markers. I also have a smaller 6-inch version for when I do special effects in speed line. This tier are called French curves. They're guidelines for when I need to draw some curves. On a digital program, it is way easier to achieve clean line work when it comes to curves, but freehandedly drawing them on paper requires a super steady hand and years of practice. I do have very shaky hands, which does make it a bit difficult, so I do rely on these curves from time to time. And on that same vein, I also use this compass for when I need to draw in circles. No matter how hard I eyeball something, my circles are always slightly lopsided, so this is a great tool to have lying around. When I draw directly on manuscript paper, I use the Pilot mechanical pencil to draw in the line. But for time crunch, I print out a digital sketch and staple them onto the back of my final manuscript paper. Don't be too worried about the staple holes, you can always edit it out digitally. Then I use a light box to reveal the printed digital sketch underneath, and this helps me bypass hours of drawing in pencil lines and dive straight into inking. This light box is a very cheap and basic one from Amazon. I don't think I spent more than $20 on it. I also prefer this method because if I mess up on the final ink beyond what whiteout and some corrections can do, I can just print out another page of the sketch and start back from inking. It helps save a lot of time too, especially when on a deadline crunch. Now, you will move on to the pens and ink. This is my favorite section of this video because I do have quite a collection of pens that I love sampling and trying out, but my main tools of the trade, specifically making mangas and comics, is this. This dip pen composes of two parts, And this here is the nib holder. You can integrate different nibs depending on the use case, which I will go over shortly. There are other options of nib holders, but I've been using this Tachikawa T4 nib for the many years I have been drawing manga and find it easy to change out. I never really had to buy a new one despite me not really taking the best care of it, so this is the only brand I can really vouch for. And the main nib that I do use is a Zebra G-pen nib. If you have watched many manga artists behind the scenes videos or interviews, they may say that they use a G-pen. This particular nib is very versatile and helps give you control of the line weight depending on how much pressure you put on the pen. It is my personal go-to, but you may find yourself reaching out for other nibs depending on your drawing style. Another nib that I do have on hand is this Tachikawa Maru Pen. This is for extremely fine details and helps you have full control of your line work. I used up my old nibs, so I went and bought some new ones, hence why they are still in the package. But if your drawing style is more detailed and more careful than mine, it's definitely a nib I would recommend. I do have these other ones, but I've yet to personally try them out, like this Nikko brand G-pen and this Japanese nib. Maybe I'll make a video in the future trying out all the different nibs. And now you're thinking, how do you put ink on these nibs? Well, this is a glorified dip pen. So you'll have a bottle of ink to dip the nib in and draw until it runs out, and then dip it again. So my current ink that I am using is this Kuretake Black Ink 60. It does the job, but I mainly got this one in particular because it's waterproof when it's dried up. The ink goes smoothly through the nibs and that's all I can really ask for. This bottle also takes forever to go through. I think I have drawn around 4 short mangas and I think I've only gone through maybe 3/4 of the bottle after extensive use. So I'm open to trying out different brands once I use up all the ink. And while inking with nibs, it's also good to have a cup of water on hand to clean up the nibs in between ink dips, and a paper towel just to get rid of excess water on the nib. I also use Multiliner for drawing in borders or need a much better control of my line work. I do switch between Sakura Micron and Copic fine liners. I do think they are both very good for drawing, so I don't have a preference between the two brands. Generally, I use the 0.7 size for my panel borders and then use the 0.1 or 0.3 sizes for all of the itty bitty details. For when I need to color a huge area in black, I use the brush pen I have on hand. Tombow Fudenosuke Fine Brush Pen. It's good for moderately small areas, and then the Pilot Shunpitsu Pocket Brush Pen for very large areas. I do have many variations of both of these pens, and they all do the job well, so definitely not picky on that front. And we cannot forget about the whiteout. I use this Deleter number 4 whiteout. Now I personally find it a bit too thick for my liking. I'm not able to use my G-pen with this, but I do have a better time using it with a brush to correct lines. Like the inks, I'm open to trying out any new brand, but I want to finish up this bottle first. Sometimes I do use whiteout tape for when I don't want to deal with using the whiteout ink. This gets the job done, but the tape is fragile, so if I use this, I go over it with a multi-liner pen instead of the G-pen. And then last but not least, the mighty Sakura gel wool pens in white. Now I've honestly had these for years, and personally the smaller sizes have already dried out on me, so I mainly use the size 8 and 10 when doing any corrections. Whew, that's all for this section, and we will move on to the final bulk of manga supplies. So to add a little razzle dazzle on my pages, I like to add green tone for shading and special effects. Now, I'm not based in Japan or in Asia, so I don't have much access to reasonably priced green tones. With that said, the selection that is available within the US of ads is quite limited, so I'm only using them for basic grayscale shading. So here are the green tones that I do use. These are all from the Deleter brand, and there are varieties of shades available, but the main one that I do use is the 106, which is lighter, and the 113 and the 114, which are darker grays. To use these, I use a normal scissor to cut out an area of screen tone that I intend to use. Then I use either my hand or a set of tweezers to carefully place them on the final manuscript. The screen tone adhesive isn't super strong, so sometimes you'll need to use a spatula or something flat like an old credit card to flatten the tone. The spatula I have here is the Deleter branded one, which is honestly very overpriced, but it gets the job done. Then I use an X-Acto knife to carefully cut out the excess green tone just to make sure it lines up with the line art. The deleter manuscript paper is thick enough to handle some X-Acto knife cutting, but definitely do not press too hard on the knife. I will eventually make a full detailed walkthrough on how I use these, so keep an eye out for that on a future video. And then, once all of the final effects are added, it is time to bring these onto the computer. I used my lovely Canon Light 120 scanner to bring the pages back onto the computer. The scanner is actually quite old, I think over 10 years old at this point, so I don't know what new and modern scanners do now, but it's fairly basic since I just hook it up with a USB and is ready to go. I always make sure to scan it as a document to hide all of the brush marks, and the scan black as, well, it's solid black. You can see there is a difference between if I scanned it as a photo and as a document. Both can lead to the same results when I edit it in the end, but scanning it in document format saves a lot of time, especially when it comes to color grading and cleaning up all of the excess detail. Usually I edit these on Photoshop to remove any dust or clean up mistakes, but since I sometimes format the comic to a specific size, I do all of these edits on Procreate. So that's about all of my tools of the trade when working on a manga or comic. If you got this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful to you, and who knows, maybe I'll do an updated version once I get more experience and draw even more comics. I already have some cool videos and more comic projects in the near future, so definitely keep an eye out. I hope to see you all in the next one. Keep drawing, and wishing you all an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye!